Hello explorers, thanks for joining us again and welcome back to another exciting and informative video on our YouTube channel. If you are joining us for the first time, we want to thank you for watching. In this episode, we shall be looking at the growing concern with the trade relationship between China and Kenya. Why Kenyan officials and investors and economic development experts are beginning to question this relationship. There are risks involved, no doubt, but in this episode, we will discuss this like never before seen. So we encourage you to watch this video to the end for clarity and better understanding. So without any more delay, let's just dive straight into it. China and Kenya have a relationship of enhanced economic cooperation, though the trade balance have heavily favored China and concerns over debt sustainability have grown with Chinese lending. Closer economic ties have paved the way for more security cooperation. However, the resulting geopolitical rivalry risk exacerbating political fragmentation in East Africa and the Horn of Africa as countries align themselves with either the West or China. It remains to be seen how effectively Kenya can triangulate between China and the West. How will the Nairobi management to forge mutual beneficial relationship with the West and also sustain the constructive engagement with China? If you look at the relationship between China and Kenya, since 2015, bilateral trade between China and Kenya has been on the rise. From 2015 to 2019, the total trade volume between the two countries was just over 18 billion US dollars. Of this, Kenya imports from China made up of 97%, while Kenya exports to China were mere just 3%. Thus, the trade balance skewed heavily in Chinese favor. Import rose due to Kenya's engagement with China's Belt Road initiatives, especially from the start of the Standard Gauge Railway. If you look at other areas, the incorporation of the Lamu Port South Sudan-Ethiopia Transport Corridor project into the BRI also is significantly important. The slight increase in Kenya's export during the same period suggested Kenya's export may have discovered some sustainable opportunities in Chinese market. The growing trade deficit is underpinned by the fact that the Chinese leading exports to Kenya's electrical equipment and machinery, predominantly used in construction sector, while Kenya's leading export to China consists of minerals, ore, slag, sodas, ash and a lot of other agricultural equipment. Their imbalance has prompted concerns among policymakers about the need to review China's-Kenya's trade policy. We shall be looking into this from another perspective, why this relationship has drawn a lot of concern in geopolitics in terms of the relationship. Kenya plays off China and the West for development goals. If you consider this particular operation, China's growing economic power and heightened engagement in Africa enhance the geostrategic importance of anchor states like Kenya. In the early 2000s, Kenya foreign assistance came mainly from the Western countries and stood approximately just over 750 million US dollars. Chinese presence means Kenya could diversify its external source of development assistance. So looking at moving in further century, Chinese loan in Kenya stood just over 4.9 billion US dollars as of 2018. Kenyan policymakers tend to perceive Chinese development assistance as free from enormous condition and therefore favor it as a counterweight to Western aid, which is often paired to good governance. Moving ahead, Kenya has gained diplomatic space to maneuver at its engagement with the West by wrapping infrastructural mega projects into the BRI, thereby being loosely associated with China. Global geopolitical arrangement. Beijing readiness to enhance Kenya's position as East Africa's main gateway is perceived in Kenya as a Chinese strategy to counter Western influence. However, Kenya maintains a subtle position on whether it favors the West or the East, which depends on the context. When United States President Barack Obama visited in 2015, President Kenyatta stressed Kenya's openness to constructive engagement with all countries. During his second state visit to China in September of 2018, moving back, President Kenyatta affirms his country's commitment to an interconnected world, looking at different areas. Although foreign ministers' visits to Kenya was part of Chinese annual diplomatic visit to Africa, it came barely 6 weeks after a visit from the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Whereas the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was hosted in Nairobi, Wang flew directly to coastal cities of Mombasa, where he inspected oil terminals funded by Chinese Exim Bank at the cost of just over $400 million. Although Kenya wants to engage with both sides, it is increasingly likely to find itself aligned with China, given the attraction of economic cooperation with no strings attached. However, this strategy appears strained At the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Kenya voted for a resolution calling on Russia to withdraw its troops from Ukraine. However, as the situation unfolds, Kenya may reveal its position again. Options to maintain a strategic equal distance between the axis represented by NATO and strategic aspect also represented by Russia, China, authoritarian exit. Looking at different areas, the mixed views on Chinese growing presence in Kenya. According to research organization Afrobarometer surveyed, asked respondents whether they thought China, the United States or Japan had positive or negative economic and political influence on Kenya. Among Kenyan respondents, over 54% felt China was a positive economic and political influence. Favorable views of the United States were only slightly higher, just at 57%, while Japan received positive response from just 39%. Looking at other areas, if you consider this particular research, the views varied within different sectors of Kenyan society. For instance, among Kenyan business people, perceptions are informed by whether they gain or lose from China's presence. Small traders in Nairobi complained that Chinese traders are squeezing them out of business. They usually come to our shop to disguise as customers and ask for our prices, only to go back to their country and bring to the market the same products as much as lower prices. On the other hand, Kenyan political elites were generally positive about Chinese engagement. On one leader's observing, Beijing acted nicely and generously to really promote its long-term strategic and political objectives in Africa. As in other African countries, the lack of socio-political conditions on loans and Chinese general indifference towards Kenya domestic politics and also welcomed by Kenyan elites who compare Chinese stand favorable with the conditions put on Western support. However, Kenya's foreign policy towards China may be impacted by the erosion of optimism about increased cooperation, particularly in relations to the trade deficit, which could have implicated the Chinese road, rail and other projects within the country. If you consider this unsustainable trend in the needs of revision in the country of Kenya, concerns over the trade deficit provided the impetus for a review of trade relations. As of 2018, the two countries began talks on the sanitary and phytosanitary protocol to expand market access for Kenyan products in China. Kenya is pushing for a review of tariffs levied onto cut flowers and vegetable export. During Wang's visit, Kenya and China signed a memorandum of understanding and a set of working groups to look into tariffs and non-tariff barriers to Kenya and Chinese trade. They declared was to fast-track the increased export from Kenya and China. They also signed two protocols to facilitate trade, particularly export of Kenyan avocados and aquatic products. Although Kenya's economic has remained resilient during the pandemic, its growing debt problems may predispose the countries to default on Chinese loans in the near future if measures are not taken. On the security front, geopolitical rivalry is likely to exacerbate regional political fragmentation as countries align themselves with either the West or China. It remains to be seen how Kenya will manage the inevitable pressure of balancing between in dealing with the Western countries and China's partners. Hopefully we've informed you in regards to the murky relationship that Kenya finds itself at the moment, dealing with the Western countries and also operating on the back door with China. We all are looking to see in the next decades how this relationship will look like. We want to thank you for watching. If you are new to this channel, we will encourage you to check some of our informative video on this channel. We are looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.